Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to a very special episode of No Vacancy. Today we are recording because I got guests coming from overseas, over there in London, UK, and this is the best time for us to do it. I'm excited because finally hoteliers have an ability to pay more attention to teens in urban environments. And I'm a guy who has freshly gone teenagers. They're in their 20s now, and spent a lot of time wondering what to do with them, how to keep them engaged, how to keep them interested. We're going to break down that today because we've got Saar and Alicia on today. We're just put out a great report. They're from the Wonderland Think Tank. Guys, how are you today? Great to see you, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us. We're so great. Thanks for having us on your show.
Yeah, so this is exciting, and it's difficult because the major resorts like we have here that we go to in the Caribbean, Mexico, and all that. They got these kid programs. They're great for young kids. Teens are ignored. In the city, they do a little things for kids. Teens are ignored. You have discovered ways to make sure that these folks are engaged. So let's go a little bit back. First, congratulations on putting out this report, but where did this come from? What are you thinking? And how can people be more successful listening to what you have to say?
Thanks for all those questions. We'll try to work through them.
Yeah, you've got 26 minutes.
So the first thing to say is that we're actually not from the hospitality world at all. We're game designers, we're toy inventors, we've come from kids publishing. So we really have our feet firmly in the camp of kids and teens and fun. And over the past year or two, we sort of turned our gaze to what hotels are doing, what the hospitality world is doing. And we realized, to put it bluntly, not very much. As you said, the resorts are doing quite a good job. There's kids' clubs, there's pools, there's beaches. But when you look at urban environments and you look at cities, there's a real missed opportunity to give some of that same attention and intention to younger guests, which is a shame because not only are they a lot of fun to work with, they are also extremely influential, as Saar will talk about more. And teens are particularly savvy, socially connected, and powerful in a family environment and decision making. So let's give them a chance to use their clout, to use their know-how and their sense of imagination.
So let's break that down for a second, right? Because I think that we come into this with teens like they're not interested, right? They're teenagers, so they're rebelling. They don't want to do this, that, and the other thing. But I also think it's a lot easier to throw, a plush toy at a little one or something and call it a day and feel like you're successful. But it's a little bit more challenging for teens. So I think maybe those two things conspire with each other to work against our ability to connect with this influential audience. Am I on track, guys, or am I just cuckoo for
Yeah, I mean, I think you're completely right, and I think that's why they get missed because you chuck a teddy bear or a coloring book at a 6-year-old, and they're basically happy. You give a grown up a glass of champagne, and their needs are met, and then you've got a
I,
fortune.
honestly, I like champagne and a teddy bear. But, right.
You'll get both. But if you have a 14-year-old standing in the lobby, they get ignored. They're invisible, and that makes them feel really crappy. Now, yes, they don't want a teddy bear, and probably they're not going to get given a glass of champagne unless the parents are kind of up for that. But there are still ways to meet their needs. Do you want to talk a little bit about gaming and
Yeah, so coming from the world of toys and games and video games and book publishing, that's kid central, and they've perfected engagement with kids. They've perfected loyalty and kind of customer satisfaction. We know that there's so much going on, and yet only 3 items cross over to city hotels, which is the coloring book, the generic teddy bear, and the tent in the room, right?
Right.
So
I would
say
does s'mores fit into this category? Because I see more urban hotels with that, but I mean, I'm just teasing on that because that's more of a snack, not really an activity.
right? Yeah, I mean, hotels love to ply kids with the free ice cream or the cookie before bedtime. But again, that's not really engaging the child's interests. And a lot of parents are kind of starting to rebel against the idea of winning kids over with sugar. I mean, sometimes we want to bribe our kids with a bar of chocolate if they behave well, but it kind of gets out of hand and it's also not terribly sophisticated.
Also, Dr. Producer Suzanne gets me to do these broadcasts. I get a Hershey bar after this.
Very good. Well, you're doing a good job, both of you.
And maybe we can convert you to a more healthy treat,
An apple.
So I see one blockade that I know parents want to blow through is the dependency on screens. When you're in the family environment, you want to bring people together. And you folks gave me this great one sheet that talks about how the kids' economy is worth $850 billion, which hotels can tap into. So how could we start to create those memories, create those experiences, and stay away from those screens so families could bond and kids could go away going, thank goodness we went to this urban hotel instead of that property down the road?
I think the first thing is to recognize that despite the fact that their kind of heads are in the devices, that doesn't mean that they're not craving connection, that they don't want to spend quality time with.
Correct. I think in society, at least here in America, you tell me what's like in the UK and other places. I think that we've gotten, I don't want to say the word lazy, but it's easier to put the kids in front of a screen than to do all the hard work to engage them. And that's starting at a young age now, much younger than when my kids 20 years ago were infants. So it's hard to break that cycle. And kids may not say they want that, but I do believe they yearn for something beyond the screens. And that's exactly what I think you're leading to, Saar.
I think what we also find really interesting about teens is that even though they seem uninterested, they're highly interested.
Well, that's cool, right? They have to put on that persona as they're trying to find themselves as human beings. So
Yeah.
we can't take that at face value. We have to do what you're saying and break through.
We've actually found it quite interesting when we present different age groups with a range of different toys, how much cross-pollination there is between what you would imagine a child or a teen would go for and what they actually get interested in. And I think what's really interesting about teens is that they actually span child to adult. And they love some of the things that their younger siblings are getting. And they're also really interested in the sorts of things that hotels are doing to engage with grown-ups, which, even though they're quite a narrow segment, it gives us a real breadth to work with because we can utilize kind of gameplay styles from those younger age ranges, as well as communication styles that appeal to grown-ups. So actually, far from being limited, they're a really expansive segment because they are interested in so many different things.
And in fact, are such a cool environment that what we want to do with hotels is create these kind of gold standards, these new traditions that actually also apply and appeal to teens. Therefore, the potential of kind of associating a hotel, whether it's a specific brand or across the board for teens, is something that has huge economical value for the industry.
And the other thing that I would say is a lot of the time teens are relegated to their screens because they're not being catered to. So what other option do they have? The little child is being given a coloring book and a teddy bear. The grown-ups are being given, all of the pictures of the world. And then what does a teen have? It's phone or it's dad's, iPad. Whereas if we can start to put some great product or great interactions in their hands, they're going to go for it because they're not being given anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. So help us understand what we need to do in order to better captivate that age group, which will lead to kids saying, hey, I want to go back to that urban property.
Yeah. So, even though teens are very tech-minded, we actually do veer towards getting them off screens for the types of interactions that we want. So we're looking at things like family games, board games. Actually, you might think that board game sales and tabletop games sales have gone down. They haven't. They're going up.
Okay, it's just to say, because I geek out on this, it's really interesting because actually video gaming expands the market and makes more people gamers and more people kind of perceiving themselves as people who play games, and therefore that actually brings along all the other types of games.
So that's an interesting philosophy that you're saying that video games actually spur the want to do games in an offline environment. Alicia?
Yeah, exactly. I think, tabletop games and board games now borrow some of the cool from video gaming. So, the kind of the, the the blow up of video games is actually given some credibility to the idea of kind of
That's really
having games.
Yeah, because I'm of the generation of when the tabletops became video games, like when Dungeons and Dragons became like Legend of Zelda on Nintendo.
Yeah,
for-
exactly.
you know.
And we know from every age range that what they look for in a holiday is time, meaningful time with each other. So I think if we can give them platforms to do that, be it a family game or a family activity, then they're going to go for it because ultimately that's what they're trying to get out of their holiday. They don't go into a holiday thinking, let's all four of us or five of us sit on our screens and barely communicate. So we just need to give them great play styles, interactive modes to spend that time together.
And I would say even more kind of more simply than that, it's about kind of giving that extra thought, giving something that kind of shows that that is welcoming. We're big on the fact that kind of across the board with teens, the creative mind is really active, right? So there's other minds that are active, but creative is kind of something that we get across the board, and giving them just that kind of level up of stationary, giving them a prompt or a reason to feel more at home and to feel understood it doesn't even need to be a whole game to occupy them. It's that extra kind of connection between the hotel and the guest.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And this is the stuff out there, guys, that are listening, watching right now that I keep arguing over the time. You got to figure out ways to differentiate your experience from others and even just creating an atmosphere. Saar and Alicia, I'm picturing me with my kids a few years ago when they were sitting on their phones and I was drinking the champagne, as you were talking about, although in my case, I might have been an old fashioned. And it would have been cool to have some sort of engagement activity that even if it lasted just 10 or 15 minutes, it would, I think, helped us set that stage for a more meaningful experience there and for the rest of the evening, because you've already kind of like broken down those barriers with the kids and got them in the non-screen kind of moment.
Yeah, I think you make another good point, which is a lot of hotels do their welcome at check-in, maybe room arrival, and then the engagement drops off. And that's true for kids and teens. And something that we think a lot about is the idea of staggering that engagement. So it's not something that disappears after day one or, the arrival at the hotel. What can we do that's dispersed throughout the entire stay that keeps that level of engagement high, keeps those kids and teens feeling really valued, like they are really the VIPs in the family? Because we also know from all of the data that parents are happiest when their kids are happy. We don't need to
Self. Is it speak for yourself? I'm just kidding.
a happy child is an easy child, and that's it.
As a parent, and my wife and I, if all we want is happiness for our kids, no matter what, at the sacrifice of ourselves, obviously, right? So it's a fundamental part of humanity.
Correct. And when you delight a child or a teen, you've actually done two for the price of one because you've got the child and you've got the parent. And the other thing is this is a real, emotional benefit, but there's a real commercial side to this as well. We know that when families are on holiday, their purses are open. They're up for spending that extra bit of money to make the holiday a success. They're going to throw money at the situation if it keeps their kids and teens.
I know one theme park company that understands that more clearly.
But let's take that thinking and bring it into city hotels and urban destinations, because we also know that teens overwhelmingly prefer to go to urban destinations rather than resorts, rather than, kind of remote destinations. So cities are really attractive for teens. But when you get to the hotel, as we said, there's nothing there and there's nothing even for the family to spend money on. These are willing customers,
Right.
but they don't have the goods or the channels to spend that money that they're willing to. And go on.
Yeah, just to comment on the kind of behavioral economics and the behavioral science aspect of it, where we're looking at, not coming from hospitality, not coming from hotels. We wanted to kind of understand, what is the, what is, okay, so there's the bed, right? But it's much more than that. The forming of memories, the kind of attachment, whether to a brand or to a moment. And, you mentioned very astutely that by having that kind of, 10, 15 minutes of gameplay, that is something that will forever be associated with that room, with that hotel, and really kind of have that peak moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Saar, I look back into my memories, and when I was 14 or 15 years old, my parents took me to California, and we went to then owned by Clint Eastwood, the Hod's Breath Inn, and played like an old-timey board game of some type. And I don't really remember the game itself, but I remember the night, and I remember being with my parents, and I remember the warm feelings that are associated with it. So I think at the essence, that's what we're really talking about, is creating those experiences that create those warm, fuzzy memories that they take home with them. And then, what I'm going to say next will make them more likely to come back again. So we're talking about monetizing in the moment and creating an easier way to get customers to come back time and time.
And I think Alicia will tell the story of how you can invest so much as a hotel, as a property or a venue, so much in order to get so little return. And yet any small thing, if it's done kind of thoughtfully and meaningfully towards a child, really offsets all of that other spend.
Exactly. This is kind of low-hanging fruit. This is small fry. Comes to kind of setting budgets for your hotel and the sort of wild and wonderful things that luxury hotels are doing for their guests, renovating lobbies, bringing in Michelin star chefs. It's the works. And when you're looking at kids, honestly, they're really happy with a small trinket or just the idea of something or a mission. What are you going to do next? And so it's really, really, pennies, it's cents. And it really makes a difference because no one else is doing it. So this is an opportunity for hotels to kind of dare to be different and to stand out from the crowd. And it's a space that is so unoccupied, we found to our kind of surprise as we waded into this industry. And there is a market there for the taking. And the other good thing to mention is that there are willing partners to go on this journey in the form of kids brands, toy companies, game companies. That's our world. And these guys are eager to be in hotel spaces because it's a great platform and it's a great space for them to engage with their customers.
And historically, it's interesting because we also looked at the history of it and the kind of partnership and collaboration of hotels and brands, and retail. And it's a very interesting story about how it kind of came to be and evolve. Hotels are more valuable than hoteliers think. There's really such a vested interest from these brands, whether it's to do with retail space, whether it's to do with product placement, promotional, or brand association or attention, where, in a way, what hotels are getting, it's not just the fee for the booking. They're getting attention, and that attention these days is worth so much that there's just a lot of scope to explore here.
So when you're thinking about games and other ways to engage people on site, like what kinds of games are we talking about? Are we talking about Connect 4 or are we talking about Monopoly? Because Monopoly takes a whole long time. Or are there some, wholly original products, since you guys are toy makers, inventors and stuff like that, that better play into fostering parental children engagement in this kind of short form atmosphere?
Yeah, I think you've probably mentioned the exact two games that every hotel currently has. Every
Connect 4, because, I used to be a champion of that. Of course, we're in my own house and I'm an only child, but I like to think of myself as champion.
every hotel has a copy of Monopoly with all the paper money flying around, Scrabble, and Net4. And in the meantime, as Saar said, there's a multi-billion-dollar industry out there that are creating the most exceptional, innovative games, toys, gifts. So we need to get better product in their hands, which create memories that, as you said, are going to last a lifetime.
I'll give an example. So, some reviews of games that we've worked on ourselves and kind of know from the industry have it's the most fun I've ever had on family night, or it's the hardest I've ever laughed, or we had an amazing evening. Take that and kind of stick it with the hotel, and then that really rubs off on the brand, creates these amazing memories, and they're just a part, and our job is to kind of bring them all together.
Yeah, I mean, there's games that last 5 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 3 days.
Like,
Thinking about the opportunity.
yeah, like I can imagine starting a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, while having a mimosa at a Ritz-Carlton, But some of those shorter games, the Uno, Connect Four, even like Clue kind of variety makes sense to me.
Yes, I mean, these are all wonderful games, and there's a million more where that comes from. And I think, as we said, connecting these two industries is such a win-win for everyone.
Yes, Saar, go on.
I think it's also an opportunity for hotels to get in on new and evolving types of tourism, like video game tourism, set jetting, where people go to visit places from shows and films that they know, where we're seeing more and more these kind of niche, but they're kind of large niches where people go on a weekend to play a board game, a role-playing campaign with their friends, right? So there's a way to even, and by the way, also speaking of London and European cities, where a lot of the time your plans out of the hotel get ruined because of rain, right? There's really a way to kind of create these new purposes for travel.
Yeah, I like that idea too. So here's one problem that I'm seeing from my uneducated point of view. I feel like we've spent a lot of time in society moving towards video games. Plus, at the same time, that's really hurt the overall toy industry. Here in the United States, we lost Toys R Us. The big box stores started selling toys as loss leaders, but that hasn't really stuck. So we're not necessarily being exposed to those new games and don't have any familiarity with those new games, right? When Trivial Pursuit came out in like 1981 or whatever that was, they broke through big time because everybody was focused on that. So what's a great idea for hotels to be able to introduce some of these newer games that came out that are perfect in order to get it on the radar, so they'll actually pick it up instead of the Connect 4 or the one that they're familiar with?
Well, what I will say is in our report, we kind of cover hospitality, what we found out about hospitality, but also what we found out about these kids industries and how much kind of money and effort they're putting in order to put these games forward. And actually, it's very interesting because there's kind of this battle between retail where, the big chains are kind of, applying their power as far as shelf space. And there's kind of like this power struggle, which I believe hotels can really, kind of offset, where there's a lot of interest in these industries, whether it's to introduce new games, to introduce new brands. There's different ways of a lot of the time, kids can't try a certain toy at or a certain game at the shop, right? Because it's a 1 hour visit, right? But if you introduce it in a multi-day setting, it can make the whole difference between a loss, a project that kind of closed to really a hit game, as you mentioned.
Fascinating. All right. So how could hoteliers get started? What's the best thing to do? And then we'll get into how they could learn about your report and all that kind of stuff.
So I think one of the things that hoteliers should ask themselves is, are you doing anything for kids and teens that no one else in your competitive set is doing? Is there anything that you're offering across the hotel stay that feels differentiated? If you're not doing that, just find one thing to do that sets yourself apart, because there's a story there, there's a PR angle there, there's a social content angle there.
just to mention that, it's a simple question, but I think what we're saying is it's worth spending a bit of time. It's worth having a meeting or two to explore that. We're giving you the permission to do that because the payoff is just so significant.
The other thing is when it comes to teens, as you said, we can borrow both from their younger siblings, but also from their parents. And what we do know is that teens love to think of themselves as grown-ups. So when you're designing an experience for teens, you actually want to design something that a kind of self-respecting grown-up would be happy to do. Would this work for a 21-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old? Teens, as I said, want to feel like they're being treated like the grown-up that they are. So just do something for a grown-up, but offer it just for the teenager. Make it kind of feel exclusive. Exactly. So you're going to give that teenager their own moment to shine.
In fact, one of our design principles is, when we're kind of working with hotels and we're designing their amenities or their activations, we're thinking, would the parent would actually want to turn or want to try, right? Because exactly, because in a lot of ways that's that makes a very successful amenity or activation, and of course it's appealing to, across the family.
And I think the other thing is that I would say to hotels, there are experts out there that work with kids and teens. You don't need to have all the answers. I think we're asking a lot of our hotel teams to kind of know the inside and out of every kind of discipline. And in the same way that a hotel would think nothing of bringing in, an interior designer or someone to do their florals or a sommelier for the wine list, it's kind of par for the course that a hotel would work with designers and experts and consultants for the different disciplines. And we think that kids and teens should be no different. This is a really complex segment in a lot of ways, and you don't have to do it alone. So, find the people around you, whether it's a team like us. If anyone can find another team like us, I'd be interested. But, even go to your local toy shop and talk to them. And, it doesn't have to be the front of house team or the guest experience team that kind of cracks it.
Yeah, and one thing that we found from kind of our year review is really that first of all, there's definitely not a single role in hotels that is to do with kids, that have kids in it, let alone, in families is also something that
unless it's a resort where, of course, there's the kind of kids club manager.
Right. But it's typically bundled with, the marketing department or, the front of house. It's just not really something that gets the attention that it needs.
Oh, and then the other thing that I want to say in terms of where should hotels start? A lot of hotels are already doing a bunch of stuff for kids in some shape or form, but it's invisible and it's not communicated to the staff. It's definitely not communicated to the guests. And I think if a hotel does one thing, think about how you're packaging or branding or naming or marketing what it is that you're already doing, because the chances are you've already given it some thought. You've already got some amenities and some stock in the back room. But if you kind of make it into something that you can hang your hat on, then you're already communicating that you care about families. And that's more than most hotels are doing.
Yeah, and that's a better idea to me than trying to put out another picture on your urban spa with a lady with rocks on her back, because that's not something that's going to stick with customers. This is different. This is interesting. This is something that's going to help bring families together. All right, how do we learn more? How do we access this report over there?
So our report is at kidshospitality.org. Our website is wonderland.london. We're based in London, but we'll work anywhere.
And also, it's Alicia at Wonderland.London. It won't appear anywhere, but just for the listeners.
Happy to chat.
Yeah, make sure you go to kidshospitality.org. Alicia, Saar, thank you so much for being here today. That was really fun and really interesting. And hopefully we'll see you another time. And I want to thank you guys for being here today. How interesting is that? It's one of these things that when you hear it, it's like, duh, why aren't we doing that already? So in our spirit of educating you out there. Make sure that you go and get that report right now. And as soon as you're done with that, well, make sure you re-listen to this podcast. Of course, you can sign up wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, watch us on video wherever you like to watch your shows. And all shows are housed at novacancynews.com. So remember, everybody, you've got one life.